The Holy Gospel according to St. Mark, the 2nd chapter. One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as his disciples walked along, they began to pick some heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" He answered, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need? In the days of Abiathar the high priest, he entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for priests to eat. And he also gave some to his companions." Then he said to them, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." Another time, Jesus went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand up in front of everyone." Then Jesus asked them, "Which is lawful on the Sabbath? To do good or to do evil? To save life or to kill?" But they remained silent. He looked around at them in anger, deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts, said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. The Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus. The Gospel of the Lord. Please be seated, brothers and sisters. And if you have little ones with you today who might like to join Heidi and the rest of the group up here downstairs for junior church, they're invited to head down now. They're always welcome to stay as well. They don't have to go down if they'd like to hear a little bit more about Sabbath law. Someone's excited. Or Kim's excited to hear about Sabbath law. Thanks, Kim. I've mentioned an increasingly infamous clinical psychologist before in both classes and in sermons from time to time. A man named Jordan Peterson, who is from Canada and has become quite famous on the internet for his particular way of dealing with a number of issues, including religious texts. He doesn't come off as a classically religious person. That's because he's a Jungian psychologist, and if you know what a Jungian psychologist is, you know exactly what I mean. If not to worry. I only bring him up because recently he was part of a production of a number of Exodus videos. He got together a bunch of different expert scholars in the text of Exodus from a bunch of different faith backgrounds, sat them all around the table, and I cannot recommend this series of videos highly enough. It is available on YouTube. It was originally something you had to pay for, but the producers of it said, "This is so important, let's just release it on YouTube for everyone to see." So you can go look up Jordan Peterson Exodus series, and you'll find it on YouTube. You can watch it for yourself. I hope you do so. Anyway, the reason I bring it up is because I'm sure you noticed there's a Sabbath theme in the readings today, right? And I'll never forget seeing for the first time in my YouTube feed the trailer for the release of the second part of these Exodus videos. And they show little clips of the conversations, but it all starts with Jordan Peterson, this famous clinical psychologist, reading this command: "Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy." And then he looks up from his copy of Exodus at the people around the table and he says, "It's not exactly obvious to me that I know how to rest." And they all laugh because I imagine they see him as one of the hardest working people in the world. But I laugh for a different reason. because I've studied this command quite a bit over the course of my 30 years as a professional and semi-professional theologian, and I don't think anybody understands how to rest. I think he hit the nail on the head, not just for himself, but for all kinds of people. This particular command has caused consternation and controversy century after century after century among the people of Bible study communities. They don't know what God is asking for. You only have to look further than the gospel for today, right? 2 different Sabbath controversies in Jesus' own ministry. One where his disciples were very hungry as they walked through a grain field, and they picked some grain from the field, which is completely lawful on a regular day. Nobody would even think twice about it. In fact, the Israelites were commanded to leave the edges of their fields uncut so that travelers who were hungry could have a little bit of grain. But the rabbis from centuries past, who were thinking about what it means not to work on the Sabbath, had developed an understanding of this command such that if you picked that grain on the Sabbath and rubbed it in your hand and blew away the chaff, you were doing farmer's work. That's work on the Sabbath. And that's why the Pharisees said, what are they doing? What's unlawful on the Sabbath to do? And Jesus says there's obviously a spirit behind these laws, don't you think? I mean, you guys don't ever argue about the fact that Abiathar the priest was okay in giving bread to the starving people who were running away from Saul for their lives with David? There's a bigger principle involved there. Likewise with the man who needed his hand healed. Jesus was there. He had the power to heal. He said, is it better to do good or to do evil on the Sabbath? Well then, doesn't it make more sense to heal this guy rather than let him go on like that since I have the means? Plainly, people don't know what it means to take a rest. These people had such a different understanding of it that they went out and planned to kill Jesus at that moment. At the moment that he healed a person on the Sabbath. I think people don't get what it means to rest. I think that's fair to say. And not just back then. I mean, you can come up with all kinds of crazy examples from back then. They would actually move on the Sabbath because the rabbis had to figure out, how far can you go before it's work? Like how far can you travel before it's work? So they set a distance, which for years on end became known then as a Sabbath day's walk. Everybody knew how long that was. And if you knew you were going to have to walk further than that on a Sabbath, you made plans to move your house. Because you could walk so far from your house, and that's a Sabbath day's walk. So they'd bring a chair or they'd bring a piece of furniture, something that, made their house a home. They'd walk with it, they'd set it down, and they'd say, I've moved! And then they would move again. But even today, I remember being told for the first time, I was in a large city where I interned, and I noticed all the elevators had these special buttons on them. Someone told me that had to do with the law about the Sabbath, the clarifying law in Exodus 35, that you're not supposed to kindle a fire on the Sabbath, and rabbis had seen the oncoming machinery that goes along with electrical advancements, and they said when you start or when you connect a circuit, you're essentially starting a fire. So there were some folks that created an ingenious little button that seemed like you weren't connecting the circuit, but other rabbis said, no, that's still connecting a circuit, just in a different way. So they invented what's called Sabbath mode for their elevators. Are you familiar with this? You don't come from the large town where there's a great demand for this. But if you look carefully at elevators in some large towns where there's enough of an Orthodox community, you will see that little place where firefighters can put their key. And there are different modes you can put the elevator in. And one of them is actually labeled Sabbath. If you turn that key before Sabbath starts on Friday at sunset, then that's a fire that was already started. before Sabbath started. And that elevator in Sabbath mode will run to each floor all day long, and then run back to the bottom, and then run up again. So that those who don't want to kindle a fire on the Sabbath can step on the elevator when it finally comes by and ride up as far as they need to go. I don't think people know what it means to rest, okay? I think that's a fair assessment. So allow me, if you can spare the grace, to simplify what God was doing when he commanded the Israelites to rest. He ordered them, always, by the way, in the context of also explaining and reminding them that they were set free from Egypt by his doing. He ordered them to take a day off so that they could remember that God was the reason that they were free, and God was the reason that they could make a living. Stop making a living for a day to enjoy what it is the Lord has given you in your freedom and in your ability to make a living for your family. Just stop and enjoy it. Call it oversimplification if you like. But I'm pretty sure, once I've plugged in all that Jesus says about Sabbath law, that's exactly what God was doing. Now, if you want to understand the correct spirit of that law, you might need to contemplate it a little bit. So I credit Heidi with this illustration. Imagine that you worked for a company and you did good work. Okay, you did good work. The boss was quite happy with you. You were very valuable to the company. And the boss came to you expressing that you are very valuable to the company, and they want you to be able to work there a long time. They want you to last because you're just that valuable. And so the boss says, therefore, do not come in next week so that you can have a vacation and you can rest and recharge. You can imagine that scenario pretty easily, right? That's a good boss. A good boss who understands the value of a person. Now imagine that you, being the person who's just been commanded to take a vacation, started worrying about how you were supposed to take the vacation. What exactly did that guy mean? What kind of test is this? Is there an actual radius around the office within which I've come in and therefore I'll get in trouble? Do I have to worry about whether or not he meant for me to work at home? Right? Take a vacation, wink, wink. But be sure that the company is still running strong. You're so valuable. Or when I return, do I have to come with some kind of proof that I am now rested and in better shape to go back to work? Imagine if you spent the entire week anxious about questions like that. Would you have been listening to what your boss said? Obviously not. Even if you stayed outside this imaginary radius. Because that's not what he meant at all. That's not the spirit of what he was saying. He was saying, go home and enjoy the fact that you are a valuable part of this corporation. It means something to all of us here who does something so important that we consider it more valuable to us that you are taken care of, that you can recharge and spend time with your family, than that you sit here all day long burning yourself out. Now that makes sense, right? I thought it was a good, straightforward illustration. I think it really captures the spirit of this command, because whether or not you are keeping the command the way that Jesus speaks of the command has everything to do with how you feel about your boss and whether he's being straight and honest with you when he takes the strange action of commanding you to rest. If you think that's some kind of trick, or if you think there's supposed to be some kind of difficulty, some kind of sacrifice other than just not working. You've got the wrong impression about who God is. I believe that is exactly why he spends so much time reminding the Israelites that they were slaves in Egypt before he brought them out himself by his good pleasure and power and love and will in order to set them free to live for themselves. Do you still work? Well, yes, people need to work. They need to feel useful, like being a valuable member of a corporation, whatever the organization may be. They need to feel that. They need to feel that their work is worth something. But that is all in support of having a joyful life, a fulfilled life. Not part of being driven by a taskmaster God in heaven who seems to need something out of you, and so he demands more and more and more, even that you vacation properly. And look at how different that is. Now, none of the texts appear to be highlighted as a text for today, because they really all work together. But I would like you to look for a minute at the psalm for the day. And look at the attitude of God toward the rest he would like us to have. Sing for joy to God our strength. Shout aloud to the God of Jacob. Begin the music. Strike the timbrel. Play the melodious harp and lyre. Sound the ram's horn at the new moon and when the moon is full on the day of our festival. This is a decree for Israel, an ordinance of the God of Jacob. When God went out against Egypt, he established it as a statute for Joseph. I heard an unknown voice say, I removed the burden from their shoulders. Their hands were set free from the basket. In your distress you called, and I rescued you. I answered you out of a thundercloud. I tested you at the waters of Meribah, which, by the way, is a flip on the way they normally thought of it. Meribah was one of those places where they said, hey, we're out of water, God, what are you doing? And it usually says in the Bible, outside of this verse, they tested God. God says, let's be proper about this. I'm always guiding you. I tested you to see how you would respond so that you would know. Because attitude is everything, right? Am I the taskmaster, or am I the loving father and deliverer? So I tested you at the waters of Meribah. Hear me, my people, and I will warn you, if you would only listen to me, O Israel. You shall have no foreign god among you. You shall not worship any god other than me. I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of Egypt. Open wide your mouth and I will fill it. Even if you take that last thing, which is all part of the first commandment, right? Don't worship other gods. Is that because he's a taskmaster? Is he saying that in the context of saying, all right, well, here's a good hard job for you. Don't bow down to an image you made as though that's God. I mean, people do it. But once you know who God is it really that hard to say to yourself, maybe, as the prophets say, taking a piece of wood and using half of it to cook my lunch and half of it to carve a God to worship, maybe that doesn't make sense. Given that I have a God who delivered a whole nation of millions of people out of a land that kept them successfully under slavery for 400 years. Maybe I should worship that as God instead. That's only logical. That only makes sense because you direct that worship in another place and you're going to be disappointed. It's not a matter of being a taskmaster. It's a matter of being a real, loving, divine Father. A real, loving presence and power in our lives. And it's that power that says, take a little time. Take a little time out of your busy week and spend it rejoicing in what I have done, in what I have given you, and how much value you have to me that I would do these things. Sing and make music. Celebrate God's faithfulness. Only He takes real care. So, trust Him to do it. That's how I would summarize the psalm, how I would summarize the spirit of these commands, and how it is missed when you hear, take a day off, and you respond, how exactly? Now, I have, so far, only dabbled in speaking of the theme I want to use for our entire summer's worth of worship services. I would like us to start thinking in terms of an education from a loving God. You may have seen it on the sign this morning, and I mentioned it in a newsletter article a couple weeks ago. But the theme I picked was True You. Just you, the letter U. Because it's partly, this is the university where you learn truth, God's Word. And also, the point of that truth is to bring you to the point where you understand who you are to God, who you truly are, who the true you is, so that you can enjoy your relationship with Him. True you, true university, or true you yourself, right? And the Sabbath law is a great opportunity. And I've only dabbled because I didn't have such a great opportunity as I have today. The Sabbath law is a great opportunity to understand exactly what that means. Who are you? You're the people that God has set free from sin. Even if this would be the day where you first heard or understood that, throughout your entire life, it would still be true. God has set you free from sin. He has taken the guilt of being a sinner away. He has taken any opportunity that sin has to ruin the relationship you have with God, and He's buried it in Christ's tomb, and then guaranteed you by His resurrection that worked. You are the free people of God. And He commands you to enjoy it. Oh, I don't know. I mean, I got suggestions. I do have suggestions for you, all right? Because there's a spirit here, and you can draw on that spirit to come to some nice conclusions. In fact, I'll give you a challenge, because just resting, if you take that to mean I'm just going to lay down here until I die, that's not really what He means either, is it? That's not actually enjoyable. That sounds enjoyable for a little while, and then you feel like a dead fish at the bottom of an aquarium. All right, so it's not great. It's not great. All right, so I'm going to give you a little challenge. You can use this as an exercise, or you can come up with your own thing. It doesn't really matter, because this isn't a command from God. It's just a suggestion from a brother in faith who's had a little time this week to think about this. All right, so here's your challenge. For the summer, while we do this whole true you thing, all right? Pick something that you haven't already planned to do that will give you an opportunity to think a little bit more about who God is to you this summer and what He's done for you. All right, so, you might have heard at the beginning of the sermon about this podcast on the series in Exodus that Jordan Peterson did. You might pick that. You might listen to that. It takes a little while. It won't be the whole summer nonstop, but each of those times that he sat around the table with a bunch of experts, listening to each of them give extraordinary comments from their area of study on this incredible text. I mean, yeah, it takes a little while. That would fill up your summer pretty nicely. And by the way, as part of that challenge, I'm going to ask you to look around the congregation, and even consider somebody who's maybe on vacation today or couldn't be with us for one reason or another, and pick at least one. Pick at least one of them, if not a group of them, and share what you're going to do and invite them to do it with you. Because that just gives you that much more insight, that much more opportunity to understand who God is, what He's done for us, and what kind of life the true you has in His mind. Okay? So it could be a podcast like that. It could be maybe a book you've been waiting to read that you think you could share with somebody. You could share in The Chosen. Finally, The Chosen Season 4 is out. That comes out today, yes. All the legal trouble, I won't say it's done, because things have changed. But nonetheless, it's out. And it comes out Sunday and Thursday, and we're going to look for an opportunity this summer to get together and do what we were doing with the other seasons, watch it with other people, watch it together so that we can discuss it a little bit, enjoy it together. So, or you might just watch it on your own or watch it with a group, or, listen for what we're going to do here or watch it on your own. Do something like this. I'm not trying to burden you. That's why I'm leaving the task up to you. What fits in your life? What can you do to think just a little bit more about who God is, what He's done, and how valuable you are to His organization? Because you need it. You need that time. He commands you because it's good for you, not because He needs something out of you. That's what it means that the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath, right? He wasn't trying to give you a challenge by which you could impress Him. He was saying, you already impress me. I love you. Again, you look on the sign out there, it says, God doesn't just love you. He likes you. He likes who you are personally. As you understand who you are even more, you're not becoming more likable to Him. You're just rejoicing in what He likes about you. You see the difference? Find some way this summer. And by the way, it'd be great if you shared it with me too, just so I know. I'm not keeping a book or anything. Just, it would be interesting to me. Find some way to take a little extra time that you're not already taking. To dig a little deeper. To enjoy a little bit more. To understand that when God guides us in His Word, it is guidance into freedom and enjoyment of the true you. Amen. Please stand.